Hello guys, so this will be our reader's data presentation. So from the instruction given, we have chosen trifles. And today we are going to display and 5 symbolisms and we are going to mention it in our dialogues. And for the characters, I will be playing Haley.
I'm Darshi Subramaniam. I'll be playing county attorney.
I'm Nur Farah Ain. I'll be playing Mrs. Peters.
I am Nur Sharina, and I will be playing as Sheriff.
Hi, Miss. I'm Gitanjani Kanagasabay. So I'll be playing two characters, Peters and Mrs. Haley.
Okay, for the first symbol, I will be choosing the rope. Now, we shall look at which scene that the rope is present and we shall act out or read out the specific dialogues. And then I will continue explaining about the symbol furthermore. Now, my symbol could be seen in page 3 and the following is the dialogues. Well, my first thought was to get the rope off. It looked. But Harry, he went up to him and he said, "No, he's dead, all right, and we better not touch anything." So we went back downstairs. She was still sitting at the same way. "Has anybody been notified?" I asked. "No," she says. "Unconcerned. Who did this?" "Mrs. Wright," said Harry. He said it business-like and she stopped, flitting off her apron. "I don't know," she says. "You don't know?" says Harry. "No," she says. "Weren't you sleeping in the bed with him?" says Harry. "Yes," she says, "but I was on the inside. Somebody slipped a rope around his neck and strangled him and didn't wake up," says Harry. "I didn't wake up," she says after him. We must have looked as if we didn't see how that could be. For after a minute, she said, "I sleep sound." Harry was going to ask her more questions, but I said maybe we ought to let her story first to be cornered, or the sheriff. So Harry went fast as he could to River's place, where there's a telephone.
And what did Mrs. Wright do when she knew that you had gone for the corona?
She moved from the chair to one of her and just sat there with her hands held together, looking down. I got a feeling and I out to make some conversation. So I said I had come in to see if John wanted to put in a telephone. And she started to laugh and she stopped and looked at me scared. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't scared. I wouldn't like to say it was. Soon Harry got back and then Dr. Lloyd came. And you, Mr. Peters? And so I guess that all I knew that you don't.
I guess we all go upstairs first and then out to the barn and around there. You were convinced that there was nothing important here, nothing that would point out to any motive.
Nothing here but kitchen sink.
Here's a nice mess.
Oh, her fruit? It did freeze. She worried about that when it turned so cold. She said the fire would go out and her jars would break.
Well, can you beat the woman? The women held for murder and worrying about her preservers?
I guess before we're through, she may have something more serious than preserves to worry about.
Well, women are used to worrying about trifles.
And yet, for all their worries, what would we do without the ladies? Dirty towels, Not much of a housekeeper, would you say, ladies?
There is a great deal of work to be done on a farm.
To be sure, and yet I know there are some Dickinson County farmhouse which do not have such roller towels.
Okay, this is the scene done, and I'll be explaining more about my symbol now. Now, the symbol was used to kill Mr. Wright, and it can be seen as a figurative restraint that Mrs. Wright experienced her marriage to Mr. Wright. It represents her emotional and also psychological confinement in the marriage. It's because throughout the play, Mrs. Wright's life has been suffocating, and also she's been suffering a lot, close to representing a rope, which is being sort of tied around her. And this symbolizes a theme where it suppresses a woman's desire. And it also shows a metaphor where Mrs. Wright has a breaking point in using this rope, and this rope signifies her extreme depression and desperation of all these years. Thank you.
Okay, the symbolism that I've chose for trifles is the fruit jar, because the fruit jar that are being canned reflects the Minnie's intense worry about her responsibilities as a woman and as a housewife, and the pressure society has placed on her as a woman and wife. It teaches her the fear of judgment of the men that made in this society, and she does not adequately fulfill her expected role. This fear is clearly justified as the men make fun of the housekeeping roles and also the housekeeping abilities of the women. And then Minnie's fear that her hard work will be wasted and just by canning the jars breaking. Mrs. Haley and Mrs. Peters finds that this is exactly what occurred when they examined their house, and their decision to lie to Minnie and say that the jar have not broken, it established that the canning jar as a symbol of Minnie's situation, her pains that she gone through, and her nearly her situations. Then the canning jar broken as Minnie's feared, and this symbolizes the inevitability of her convocations. Thank you.
Okay. So my part is also that we have just read just now. So I just be explaining my symbol, which is a little closer. So a little closer symbolizes the woman's growing awareness and understanding of Mrs. Wright's perspective. As the woman investigate the kitchen and household items, they gradually piece together the details that shed light on Mrs. Wright's life and emotional state. The request to look a little closer represents need for empathy and a deeper examination of the seemingly insignificant details that reveal the truth behind the crime. So that is all from my part, which is a little closer.
Okay, now for the next present, I choose bird as my symbolism, and at page 10, then yeah, we will start read the script. Then after that, I will explain more about the symbolism.
No, I've seen him in town. They say he was a good man.
Yes, good. He didn't drink and kept his word as well as most, I guess, and paid his debts. But he was a hard man, Mrs. Peters. Just to pass the time of day with him, like a raw wind that gets to the bone. I should think he wanted a bird, but what do you suppose?
I don't know, unless he got sick and died.
You weren't raised here, raised around here, were you? You didn't know her.
Not till Dan brought her yesterday.
She, come to think of it, she was kind of like a bird herself, real sweet and pretty, but kind of timid and fluttery. How she did change. Tell you what, Mrs. Peters, why don't you take the quilt in with you? It might take up her mind.
Why, I think that's a real nice idea, Mrs. Hill. There couldn't be possibly be any objection to it, could there? Now, just what would I take? I wonder if her patches are in here and her things.
Here's some red. I expect this has got sewing things in it. What a pretty box. Looks like something somebody would give you. Maybe her scissors are in here. Why, there's something wrapped up in this piece of silk.
Why, this isn't her scissors.
Oh, Mrs. Peters, it's.
It's the bird.
But, Mrs. Peters, look at it. Its neck. Look at its neck. It's all to the other side.
Somebody wrung its neck.
So I will be explain about the symbolism that I chose with each bird. So in the context of triples, the bird specifically the canary represents more than just an animal. It symbolizes Mrs. Wright's own life and spirit. The bird was a source of joy and companionship for her in her lonely and isolated life. It that symbolizes the end of Mrs. Wright, happiness and freedom. Echoing the tragic circumstances of her own life within her abusive marriage. The canary's fate mirrors Mrs. Wright, silencing the and the loss of her vibrant spirit due to the oppression she faced. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Good day, I'm Darshni Subramaniam. I'll be presenting the symbol for the word quilt from Trifles, page 7. So this is the scene from page 7.
No, it's strange. It must have been done awful crafty and still. They say it was such a funny way to kill a man, rigging it all up like that.
That's just what Mr. Haley said. There was a gun in the house. He says that what he can't understand.
Mr. Henderson said coming out that what was needed for the case was a motive, something to show anger or sudden feeling.
Well, I don't see any signs of anger around here. Wonder how they are finding things upstairs. I hope she had it a little more read up there. You know, it seems kind of sneaking, locking her up in town and then coming out here and trying to get her own house to turn against her?
But Mrs. Hale, the law is the law.
It's suppose it is. Better loosen up your things, Mrs. Peters. You won't feel them when you go out.
She was piecing a quilt.
It's log cabin pattern. Pretty, isn't it? I wonder if she was going to quilt it or just knot it.
They wonder if she was going to quill it or just not it.
Frank, fire did not do much up there, did it? Well, let's go out to the barn and get that cleared up. All right, so that is for page 7. Now I'm going to explain more on my symbol. So the symbol of the word that I chose is quilt. Mrs. Hale and Mrs. Peters decided to connect the quilt to Minnie right in jail. Minnie's decision to finish her quilt requires two styles, which is quilting or knotting. They are presented as metaphors for her innocence or guilt. The act of knotting a quilt is associated with the act of strangling a man with a rope around his neck. Mrs. Hale's assurance that she would knot it represent that the woman clearly killed her husband. Meanwhile, the men, blinded by their inability to view the women's interest as anything other than trifles, continue to believe Mrs. Hale is talking about a quilt. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's the final symbol. So all of us have done one symbol for each person. So the symbols that, to summarize it, the symbols that we have chosen was bird, quilt, jar of fruit, the rope, and a little closer. Thank you.